I've seen instances of individuals that have said, guys, I'm having a bit of a rough time at the moment, and the level of engagement on those stories is through the roof.
Yes.
Through the roof. I'm not joking. I mean, I've had somebody that has had over 1 million views on LinkedIn, because of a real tragic story that he was going through. And because I think, maybe it's a British thing. We don't want to see and hear from people that are constantly boasting. We want to feel that actually there's a chink in the armour of somebody, that we want to feel that because we know that we've all got chinks in our armour. We want to know that we can, I know we look up to people that have maybe had success, but it hasn't been easy. It's the Rocky mentality, isn't it?
Hello everybody and welcome to another Digital Report podcast. And on today's episode we have Gordon Glenister, and he's an influencer marketing strategist, author of the book Influencer Marketing Strategy, and host of Influencer the Global podcast, which shines a spotlight on influencer marketing in the industry. Gordon is also the global head of influencer marketing at the Branded Content Marketing Association, as well as being behind Pitch Influence, a global competition for the influencer industry. He also runs his own Facebook group called Influencer Marketing Secrets, and hosts a regular weekly roundtable where he shares tips on influencer marketing. So welcome, Gordon. How are you doing?
Yes, very good to see you for our second attempt at trying to get a podcast together, isn't it? But so pleased to be here.
Absolutely. No, thank you. It's an interesting one. We like how we've managed to get our schedules just coming together now. So that's been fantastic. So Gordon, let's just jump straight into it. How do you go about explaining what influencer marketing is, just for anyone who doesn't know?
Well, I mean, influencer marketing is nothing new. It's like Emperor's New Clothes. It's a new title. I mean, if you look at word of mouth marketing, which has been around for years, we trust the opinions of our friends, colleagues, business friends, and family more than we often do traditional advertising. In fact, there's some research, particularly amongst millennials, that have said that they trust traditional advertising to the tune of just 1%, which is staggeringly low. They'll trust their YouTuber friends more than they will their own family. And I think this is what's so important. And now brands and organizations are realizing that by promoting their product or service through individuals, an influencer that has an engaged audience, it has the ability to create real long-lasting relationships and consumer advocacy. So I think that's really what it's about. I mean, what I describe as an influencer is somebody who has the ability to change the behavior of others through trusted opinion, knowledge, or content creation. And that's largely what it is. But it doesn't have to be, Jatinder, it doesn't have to be just a social media influencer that we often hear on the TV or whatever it is. You yourself are an influencer. So many of us are without realizing it. Coaches, speakers, technical experts, academics. Sometimes they may well be referred to as B2B influencers, or may not even refer themselves as influencers, but they are still thought leaders. And that's really what I find fascinating, is this: if you look at the extent of what influencer marketing is about, it's not just about Instagram, social media influencers.
Now, I was going to say, who can be influencers? And you've answered that quite nicely in that. And why would you say it's important these days to be an influencer, and as an ethical influencer, because you have a whole bunch of other stuff going on as well, which we could tap onto later on? But
why do you think it's important to be an influencer? Well, because actually, if you're an organization and you are, if you've got influential content, or you've got a really powerful story to tell, people want to hear from you more than they will the brand. We follow on social media people way more than we do brands and organizations. So I think if you can create, for me, content that's either inspiring, educational, or entertaining. Those are the three, ticks that I always say content should all be about. And if you hit that mark in some, if you can hit all three of them, then great. You have an opportunity to be very relatable to your existing customer base, or indeed your prospective customer base, because people want to hear stories more. I always say facts tell, stories sell. If you're just think about your social environment. And you're at a dinner party or somebody, and you've got a raconteur that's got an amazing, funny story or something. You see everybody's captivated by it. They're listening intently, and then they'll actually share that with somebody else in the physical sense. Well, that's what's happening in the online space. We're sharing great stories, and even now, by the way, I mean, I mentioned some influencers that are. Thought leaders. You've also got pets that are now influencers. You've got digital, what we call CGI, computer generated influencers. There's one called Lily Michaela, who's got something like 3.5 million followers on Instagram. Wow. And it is phenomenal what impact this individual is clearly sharing. But we've always been interested in cartoon comics, haven't we? Marvel and all. So it's not new in the way that we follow and engage with people. It's just a different, what organisations are now doing when it comes to marketing is just embracing that.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen that because influencer marketing is like the individual, isn't it? It's the thought leader. They got an idea or a philosophy or a concept that they're sharing with the world. Where traditionally you had brands that, the big brand names were considered to be the influencers, right? How have you seen like them switching from like the brand element to like the influencer thing? And how do you feel that these big organizations are like transitioning between that?
Well, because I think at the end of the day, this isn't just about promotion, by the way. Brands are realizing that actually by working with these influencers, they can create huge amounts of insight on their brands, on their brand behavior. We've often seen instances where influencers have actually been creating new brand lines or changing brands for those organisations. In fact, there was an agency that I interviewed on my podcast a while ago that I think it was Puricane. That was the brand. It was a sugar replacement product, and they brought a load of influencers over to Brazil for 3 days, and they pretty much got them to create this product for South America, for the South American audience. Within that time, the influencers were engaging with their followers on the types of design, the look, should it be this, should it be that? So really getting huge amounts of insight. So not only were the brand able to get an understanding from half a dozen influencers, but also their audience as well. So when the actual product came to market, you can imagine the level of interest, because those individual consumers felt that they'd had a hand in the development and the creativity of this particular product. So this is what brands are now realizing. This isn't just about influencers are great amplifiers for us. They're amazing content creators. They're amazing insight producers, and they're amazing sales machines. And we shouldn't underestimate that influencer marketing in the early days of 2016, it was very much merely brand awareness, top of the funnel stuff. What we're now seeing is a huge amount of growth within the bottom of the funnel in direct attribution. And in fact, I've just written an article for a major newspaper, which is influencers the new retailers. Because what I've effectively said, and in fact there was just on that. One particular monetization platform brought a number of their top influencer creators down to Oxford Street, and they had a 3-day pop-up store where some of their fans could come along. They had and they could shop, but they could shop using the app. So imagine walking past a shop and then just literally putting your phone up to the QR code and being able to then directly shop on that influencer's content. So we're almost cutting out the loops. And what I loved about this particular story is, and I interviewed some of the influencers with this, and they were saying, well, the difference between when you go into a shop, you or I, when we go into, particularly men, to be honest, when we go into a shop, we just see a load of flat lay, don't we? It's just there, and there's nobody styling it for us other than the odd mannequin. Whereas actually what you've got with an influencer, when it comes to fashion anyway, you've got, and if you find the one that you really do resonate with and you can relate to, you say, wow, that looks really good. Because what I'm seeing is, I'm seeing a range of items in situ, in a, almost like it's the perfect living, breathing case study that could be me. And therefore, I like that. I like the shoes. I like the jacket. I'll go buy all that. Yeah. And that's why major retailers are now using influencers, not just as amplifiers, but part of their entire marketing strategy. I mean, I was on the Underground the other day. I'm sure many of your listeners will start to see the likes of Molly May and other influencers now on posters. So such is the power of these individuals that are creating audiences that they're now appearing in all forms of the marketing strategy.
That's amazing. I mean, you're talking about the connection between the audience and the influencer, right?
Yeah.
What do you feel like? What is drawing that audience to the influencer? Like, what do you think the like deeper psychology in that might be?
I think that, I mean, I know it's an over hackneyed phrase, but the sheer authenticity. It's the fact that they can feel that they are relating to somebody that is like them. That's funny, that's entertaining, that's inspiring, that's educational, that's relevant, that's relatable. And that's why a staggering percentage of influencers reject direct messages from brands that don't fulfill what their personal brand values are. Because the most important thing to an influencer, or should be, is their audience. Because if they get the wrong brand collaboration, then actually their audience are gonna smell that and feel that is not authentic, that is not Josie, or that is not Billy or whatever, you know. Also, I think some of these influencers can create a brand story in a way sometimes a brand can't even do, because it's so wrapped up in its own overcrafted professionalism that this is what we have to do. And suddenly somebody's taking that key message and delivering it in a completely different tone and way. And I was actually interviewing somebody from a big whiskey brand, and they were using some influencers around the world, and they found new consumers as a direct result of their influencer strategy in different parts of the world, because of the way in which the content was created, like mixologists, like, you know, really, you know, if you're a whiskey brand, what better way than to actually embrace a whiskey connoisseur? That isn't your own, i.e. that somebody that's got an independent, so he or she is not doing it because they've been told to. I mean, obviously if there's been monetary payment, of course, then they need to make sure that they disclose that to their audience. I'm an absolute fan of proper advertising disclosure. And that's fine. I think audiences are not stupid. They realise that actually brand collaborations, you know, will involve payment in some instances as long as they know about them. But it's this idea that these individuals can create content that sometimes a brand can only dream of. And they've almost become, Jatinder, the new creative agencies. Because these individuals, in its broadest sense, are one-person photographers, videographers, location scouts, audience builders, digital marketing specialists. Can you imagine all of that? Normally a brand would pay individually for all of those different skill sets, and you've got that in one person.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting thing to see, because what you're also saying there is that we're seeing the emergence of like almost like little bubble communities which are based on the individuals, like you said, the individuals' values, their beliefs, their likes and their interests.
Of course.
And it is quite funny because when we had like, you know, big platforms, social media platforms where everybody was on, we're now starting to see like break off little communities. which are more around the interest of the individual, and the internet's allowed everybody to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the last 12 months or 18 months, I think, have actually swelled online communities in a way that we could only have dreamed of. And brands are realizing now that what better way to create a customer is to create a customer community. One of the best examples of that is the Lego community with over 3 million members. I was actually talking about this at a conference only last week. And when you consider the majority of those people are not 10 and 11-year-olds, but made up of engineers that have a fascination in creative design. So they've created not only a community, but within that, they've created special groups within that, which is about, like design competitions, like solving problems. This is what's so fascinating. I mean, even if you had somebody like a fly fishing expert, that may be not somebody who's 25. That may be somebody in there much older, but he's an absolute expert on all of the tackle, all of the relevant kits and requirements. He may only have, I don't know, 1,000 followers on Instagram, but as long as his content is consistent with everything to do with fly fishing, then actually, I would suggest that his level of engagement will be very, very high. And therefore, if I was a rod manufacturer or somebody that was looking to engage with potential consumers of my rods, what better way to do it than with a number of people that are in that sort of specialist arena that have a high level of engagement and are authentic in the way that they tell stuff.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it's so fascinating to see how we're now, we're in that world, in that space now where it's okay to have interests in certain things because because the internet's like borderless, right? It's allowed everybody to come on and just connect with other people that share similar thoughts, beliefs, views, values. And that's just a fascinating thing to see, right?
It really is. And global now, global.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe one positive side from the last 18 months is the fact that we've all become a lot more technically savvy, and we've able to, I almost feel the global community has become closer. And when it comes to influencer marketing and digital marketing, then there holds, no barriers. I mean, my Facebook group that you mentioned earlier, I've got a high percentage of people that are from all around the world. And, what's really good is that we like to sort of talk about influencer marketing in America, in Brazil, in other parts of the world, where there are sometimes cultural differences. But equally, what works in one country can work in another, and being able to share those experiences, I think, is highly valuable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you talk about technology, it's funny because before the whole pandemic kind of stuff, when you have conversation with customers want to meet up with you that had the eye-to-eye conversation, especially in my field, like, just doing web design, development, that kind of stuff. They wanted to do that. And I would say, like, you don't necessarily have to do that. We could jump on Zoom, let's have the conversation online. And now everybody's like, let's just have Zoom calls.
Yeah, true. Because you've realized that it's efficient. The one thing that I must just say, which is quite comical, is when you feel like you've known somebody so long on Zoom, then you go meet them for the first time, and the first thing that you notice is their size.
Yes.
Because you have no sense of size perspective when you're sitting at a similar level. So they're either taller or smaller than you imagine, and that's always been that. I've had that 4 or 5 times recently.
I noticed that we just last week we had we were doing like these monthly dinner meetups,
Okay.
and when we turned up there, everybody that hadn't seen us before, that's exactly what happened. They're like, "Whoa, you're so tall," or this is all this kind of. So definitely, I know what you mean. So yeah, going back to your book, right? How did your book come about? How did you get into influencer marketing? Like, what triggered that?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, formerly, I was a Director General of a trade association in the promotional products industry for 11 years. So really, my huge part of my life has been in merch and promotional products. But after 11 years, I just felt I wanted to sort of move on. So I started my own consultancy to help other trade associations and professional membership bodies, one of which was the Branded Content Marketing Association, who was being run by a friend of mine, Andrew Cantor. And we sat in the Charlotte Street Hotel in Soho, actually. And this was back in the end of 2018. And we said, I wondered if there was any odd projects that I could work with him on, and then was just about to finish. And I said, "What about this whole space of influencers and influencer marketing? There's no trade association or body that represents this hugely growing area, and I'm concerned that these influencers have got no form of representation." So he sort of like looked at me as if to say, an "oh my God" moment. So anyway, rather than create a new organisation, we created the influence division of the Branded Content Marketing Association, and we've created just recently a set of influencer marketing guidelines to help organisations and brands be better at the way that they execute campaigns, because it's still been seen as a bit of a Wild West industry. So that was the first major step that we took, and we launched it in a London nightclub, and it was really quite exciting. And then not long after that, I launched my podcast, Influence the Global Podcast. Never listened to a podcast in my life before, so it was a bit scary, but I'm now in my 4th season, which is great. And then and the reason I'm leading up to this is because the book then came randomly. I was at a marketing show, actually, and I happened to ask Kogan Page, which are a publisher, if they had a book on influencer marketing, and they said that they didn't. Anyway, so I thought, okay. Bearing in mind, I've been in the industry like 6 months, virtually no time at all. So I put a pitch through to their commissioning editor, to say, look, I'm in a good position. I could interview lots of people. I'm going to be speaking at events in the future. Blah 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 blah. Anyway, so cut long story short, they agreed to it, and I thought, oh my God, my sister, bless her, who has published a book before, said it's going to take you way way longer than you ever anticipate. So my suggestion for your first year is don't. Well, on this occasion, I did ignore my sister, but. Because I was just so excited to have a publishing contract, because I know how difficult it is to get one. So anyway, I did do it, but on the fact of it taking a lot longer, she was absolutely right. And bearing in mind I was writing it in the pandemic, there were moments where I thought, oh, I won't blaspheme on here, but I feel like it. It was a real challenge at times. But I then realised that by interviewing lots of other thought leaders, lots of brands, lots of influencers, this would be an ideal compendium of not just my perspective on it. And I've made it for somebody that's new into the industry. So therefore, I wanted to make it very readable for anybody, not overcomplicated. And 300 pages, 88,500 words, 75 interviews later, it actually was published in March this year. Again, my plan was to have a physical, gathering at a private members club, and I thought, this would be so exciting. Of course, we were in lockdown in March, so that blew that out of the water. But I had 104 people to my online book launch, which was actually very nice, and it was awesome. I won't lie, it was really good. And that was the other benefit, because it was online. It enabled people from all around the world to come in, where perhaps that wouldn't have been the case had it been in a physical space. It was published in America as well. It's done very well. Lots of people. Do you know what, Jatinder, though? I find that every person that buys a book, I'm very humbled by it. I don't know why, because I think it's because it was such a personal experience for me to have put all that together.
Yeah.
So it feels very special when people, say, I've bought your book.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you had those moments when someone's come up to you and just said, give me your signature?
Yeah, they have. Absolutely, they have.
That's crazy, isn't it, when you get that one happen?
It's really crazy. It's really crazy. And particularly when influencers that have got an audience 10 times my size want to want to have a signature, want to have a signature, and I think, oh my God, it's just me, it's just Gordon.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I know that I was at an event and I had or yeah, just one of the colleagues there just turn up and just said, she had the book that I had co-authored in and said, "Can I have your signature on it?" And I was like, at first I thought, why are you asking for my signature, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh yeah, I've done this chapter. So I relate to that.
Well, because actually, I think sometimes we look up to other people and think, "Oh my God, I'm not like a Tony Robbins." But you have to remember to yourself that other people look up to you and I
That's true.
in a different way, and we're all trying to find relatability
Absolutely.
or inspiration. And I think probably, hopefully, both of us do that with our audiences, and that's why they connect with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you mentioned that you did 75 interviews when you did your book, right? And did you go in there with the intention of collecting like a collaboration of what people are saying about influencer marketing? I mean, what was your kind of process there?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of it was just comments about particular things. So they weren't all hour long interviews. Some of that was snippets of perhaps the future of influencer marketing, where it's going to go. Because what I didn't want was to ask the same questions to 75 people, because otherwise you're going to get a lot of similarity. What I wanted to try and do was take little snippets from people that I could use in certain areas to to make the point that I was, to advocate the point I was trying to make. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. But yeah, it was really, so I'd got somebody from the gaming sector, so he was able to give me a very specific thought about how gaming and how the gaming industry has embraced influencers.
Yeah.
And then somebody that's the foodie tribe, for example, that runs a big number of food influencers in America. A different perspective from her. So yeah, it's a wide range of different interests, and of course, what I was also interested in what their thoughts were on the future, where it was going to go. Live streaming, for example, and there's been a huge growth in that, particularly in Asia. I don't know if you know, but last year, Alibaba and Amazon both put out a request they were recruiting 100,000 influencers.
Right.
Which is just speaks volumes, doesn't it? Because they
Wow.
realise they have the ability to sell product in a way that almost nobody else can.
Yeah.
And so that, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. The ability now for Instagram shopping has been transformational. I mean, it really is. You see a product on an influencer, you click a link, go to the shop, buy it. You could do that at 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't have to go anywhere. Which is why I've written the article, "Influencers are the New Retailers," because of the simplicity. You've almost got your own shop in one individual.
That's right.
And more importantly, you can ask them for advice,
Yes.
which I couldn't go and ask a retail shop at 2 o'clock in the morning, or not that I want to be shopping at 2 o'clock in the morning, but that I wanted to, because they also don't, may not know my style or my individual needs in a way that the person I follow does, because they are, they're so relatable to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, when you so you created your book, you've got all of this structure in place, right? So anybody who wants to kind of learn about that, they can get the book from Amazon. It's available on your website as well.
Yeah.
Would you like to share a bit more about the kind of structure? Like if somebody comes in and says, "Oh, what is influence? Or how do I get involved? What do I need to, like, basic stuff I can follow, or what the book is, how it's structured?" Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, the most important thing, like any influencer strategy, and by the way, don't assume it'll work in every particular sector. People, I think, should realize that this is one marketing and advertising media. It isn't necessarily the be all and end all. There's plenty of examples of where influencer marketing can work very effectively as part of a wider marketing reach. So I think sometimes it's about managing people's expectations about what is possible and what isn't. How many influencers let's just say you were a brand and wanted to use influencers rather than be one in the first place. How many influencers before I can move the needle? If I run one campaign with one individual, with one story and one post, well, that's the equivalent of putting one advert on TV and thinking that everybody's going to flock to your product. People need to see the product a number of times and to see it as part of a story and an engagement. So all of that thing is like any sort of strategy. The research part is the most important thing. What are you trying to do as an organization? Are you trying to create brand awareness? Are you trying to create sales? Are you trying to create insights and research? So it's about having a clear purpose before you even start. It's important to think to yourself, I'm going to need a budget. But even if it was for a gifting campaign, you're going to need a budget to be able to mail it. And how are you going to get and find out all of the addresses of the influencers? They're not available. So you might need to work with an agency that already has that in place, or you might, if you are going to reach out to them, there's a real process here, which is this, what I call the jab, punch approach. Not literally, but what I mean is like, comment, ask. In the same way that you wouldn't go to a conference and meet somebody for the first time and then, shove a business card and say, can we do some business together? You would take the time to build up a relationship, and it's exactly the same online. So my suggestion would be is try and find the types of influencers which you believe resonate with your brand. And that might be, so the most important thing is not always the follower base, it's the level of engagement. On average, 1.6% is Instagram's average. So anything above 3% is considered very good. With micro and nano influencers, you can go even higher than that. Obviously, because they've got a smaller follower base and they're seen to be more responsive to their audience and more engaged and connected. Whereas if somebody's got 500,000 followers and they have 26,000 likes and 300 comments, they're unlikely to be able to go back to all of those people because it's unless they've got a whole team behind them. However, that said, by working with a bigger influencer, you're more likely to get reach, more eyeballs on your product. Whereas if you were to, so I would always say a range of influencers from different follower, and that's assuming we're Instagram, of course. It might well be that it's on TikTok or it's on LinkedIn if it's a B2B influencer. So really understanding what type of influencer that you want to engage with is in the same way. It's what's the type of target audience, target customer that you'd want. And then it's about, building the type of content that you think you'd like to have them do. And that starts to be about creating a proper brief for an influencer. Because if you think about an influencer as somebody that's working for you, you'd give them all the ammunition to go out and speak to the customers, wouldn't you? You'd give them the brand guidelines, you'd give them the pitch, you'd give them all of the benefits of the product, you'd give them exactly what would be required, a post, a story, a video. You talk to them ideally about what price that has been agreed, and sometimes on a gifting campaign, on a smaller level, you may not need to pay the influencer, but as the numbers grow, you absolutely will, and definitely if they are creating video content. And that's absolutely quite right and proper. And a lot of brands fail to understand this by thinking, oh, well, if I just send them a free product, they will go and promote them on their platforms, and of course that's the reason why a lot of them don't get a response. So I think that is important. Once you've sort of found your influencers, then you can make sure you've got a start date, and a finish date as how long the campaign's going to last. I mean, all of this sort of stuff is in the brief, of which there is a template within my book, actually, so you can have a look at that. And I'm quite happy to, just as an extra for any of your listeners, if they want to email me, I will extract that brief document and send that to anybody that wants to me for your listeners as well. And once the campaign, and the most important thing, of course, as well as the campaign, is to then measure it. Make sure that you looked and you are watching, because you can only manage what's been measured, and you can only measure if you've got proper goals that have been set at the start. So this is really going to be about, likes, shares, comments, views, dwell time, downloads, visits to landing pages, all of those types of things. You're dealing with people, so it's not an exact science, but it means that if you're dealing with, 20 influencers and you're starting to see some type of content work really, really well with 5 or 6 of them, then, it's very possible that you can switch to the second part of the campaign and make some suggestions to some of the others. But also you can decide whether or not you want to use their content, as long as this has been agreed with the influencer, in your own social media and indeed on your website. So, you've not only got their amplification, but you've got the ability to use the content that they created for your own use. They tend to license that for about a year, normally, when there's an agreement in place. And that's about it, really. So it's about making sure that you've got a budget, you've got a brief. In many instances, also have a contract that stipulates exactly what both parties are supposed to be doing. Execute the campaign and evaluate.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fantastic. I mean, I wanted just to acknowledge you on the there's some raw things you said in there, like real stuff, which we've seen in the past how people don't cover these things. Where you said managing expectations, right? Like when you're having a conversation with your people, you're going through that research, you're doing that. You're really getting into like the nitty gritties of what they're trying to achieve, right? And then how you might go about doing it, because there's so much like false advertisement out there. There's so much nonsense. Oh, we could do this. We could have this many followers. This that happen. All this kind of stuff, right?
I mean, one thing I was just going to add to that, if you, there's a couple of things you can do. If you want to invest a fair bit in influencer marketing campaigns, but you've not done it for the first time, you can always use an influencer marketing agency. You can use an influencer marketing platform, which effectively is like a search tool for sometimes millions of influencers all around the world, and that will give you a huge amounts of data, like, for example, the gender split, the geolocation. Let's just say, for example, you're opening a new restaurant in London and you wanted to you don't want to be looking at a load of influencers that have got big audiences, because 80%, 60% of them could be in America.
Yeah.
So the ability for those individuals to influence they may be able to influence a lot of people, but actually, in terms of getting them to your restaurant opening, then actually a small amount. So you can also find out on some of these influencer platforms, well, definitely their engagement rate, whether or not their data is quality. In other words, have they any stage in the past bought followers, or have they not removed bot followers? This is very, very important. Now, a vast majority of influencers, particularly professional ones, have got a very, relatively clean, because they know it's their livelihood, and they know that actually brands are going to book them on the basis of a high engagement rate. Well, if you've got a lot of fake followers, that aren't going to be necessarily engaging in your content, and I almost see it as fraud, to be honest, because you're trying to position yourself to get money on the basis of a not an accurate data count. Mm-hmm. And there are other things that you can find out from these search tools. And the reason I say that is because it can be very time consuming to find influencers and find the right ones that resonate with your interests. You can definitely do that through hashtags, of course. And there are definitely hashtag tools that enable you to do that. But it just does take time. You can go to events and meet people. You can, I mean, what you can do is try with a few just to see what sort of response you get. Because one of the biggest challenges for companies is what I call the internal buy-in. So for people that don't understand influencer marketing, that hold the purse strings further up the food chain, the directors and whatever, it can be quite a difficult sell for a marketeer to be able to invest, 20, 30, 50, 100 grand in influencer marketing when they've invested in other areas. So proof of concept is sometimes quite a good idea to get it nailed. And there are certainly some of the agencies that will do that. But believe me, it works to the extent where we often say in the industry, it's 11 times greater ROI than almost any other form of advertising.
Wow.
11 times. But only when done well. So in other words, it's about making sure that you've got the right strategy, you've got the right goals, you've got the right campaign, and largely you've got the right people. So, time and time again, when it's right, it really is right, because people trust the opinions of others more than they do traditional brands.
Absolutely. I mean, let's tap on the dark side of it quickly. Like some of the negative things that can happen or things to watch out for,
Of course.
which people may not be aware about, or they may be. But what can we say about that?
So brand safety, obviously, one of the things that you do also need to be aware of is when you're searching for influencers, you need to have a proper audit of their accounts and roll back. And we've seen some instances, of course, around cricket, haven't we, that has surfaced more recently. So I think it's important that, like anybody, think about this, if you were hiring somebody within your company, what steps would you take? And it's not too dissimilar with an influencer. The other thing that you can do is ask them for a media kit.
Right.
And a media kit is like a CV. It's well designed. It will have examples of some of their campaigns that they've done, the success of them, what their engagement rate. So all of the stuff that you would need, they would have. And certainly almost all professional influencers have one of those. So do ask them for that, because you'll not have access, of course, to their business insights. Only they will. What else? To making sure that there's no blasphemy or that there's abject swearing on some of their feeds. I mean, that's another issue. I mean, if I talk about my son, he loves the likes of KSI and some of these outrageous YouTubers because they swear, because they're outrageous. So I think it's caveat emptor at the end of the day. Let the buyer be aware of what they're letting themselves into. If they want to be cool, trendy, know that those influencers, you're connecting with them because of who and what they are. And if you're a brand that feels good about that, then that's okay. So I think that's an issue. Online trolling is a real challenge for influencers, because you shouldn't underestimate, whilst a lot of them get lots of positive comments, they will also get some negative comments, which can be really painful. I mean, you are effectively putting yourself out there as a brand, as a human brand. If we're unhappy with a service of, I don't know, a major telephone company or something, we can say what we like on it, because it's almost like it's a brand. It's a brand they've got. But an influencer is also a brand. And they can suffer as well. I mean, there have been lots of instances where influencers have had mental health issues, and I'll tell you for why. A number of reasons. Because as their audience grows, so the audience wants more of them. They feel like they're on a hamster wheel of constantly creating content. I've seen at Christmas, you'll see some people that say, as we get close to Christmas, you'll see some of the creators that will say on their feeds, guys, I'm taking 2 weeks off. They're actually having to say that on their platform to manage the expectations of their audiences. And I think, I mean, it's, as I say, trolling is an issue. And also, if they've been attacked in the media in some shape or form for, and some cases, deservedly so. What happened in Dubai was disgraceful. When we had a pandemic, everybody was largely suffering, and you've got pictures of blooming influencers, sharing content on the beach. Totally unacceptable in my mind, because people were having a really difficult time. What's that doing for people's mental well-being? Then influencers have got sexual harassment. So, that, which again goes straight into their direct DMs, which, we may not see. So they're having to manage that. And in many instances, they're having to do it on their own. So there's yes, I know some of the bigger influencers have got management, but they've also been in some stages manipulated by brands, trying to get away with not paying them or not paying them on time. And they've got bills. I always say a free dress doesn't pay the rent.
Exactly.
So it's not all a bed of roses. Trust me. There's a lot that these people do behind the scenes, which is very underrated. And I, for one, have seen what they do in many instances, and I'm, in most cases, very impressed.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow! I mean, these are good things for people to be aware of, because the whole. If you look at the social media world, it's mostly like, look what I'm up to, all these kind of pictures and all this kind of stuff going on, where anybody looking at it could compare themselves to thinking that's how I want to be, but they don't look at the other side of the stuff they actually have to go through and the challenges they have to deal with. And I think that's quite important to talk about as well, right?
Of course it is. Of course it is. It might mean that that they get gifted and they go on these holidays and stuff, and in some instances some of them do, but they are their own brands. If somebody's got 650,000 followers and a very engaged audience, then they are their own brand, and they have to keep up that style. Some of them will be openly sharing of how they feel at times. And their audience like that as well. I've not been a great fan of the doctored images, I won't lie, but let's be honest, the blooming magazine industry has been doing that for years, because they know people want to see. They want to see people looking good in their magazines. They want to be inspired as opposed to feeling ashamed.
Wow. So this just raises the whole question about it's like the influence that influencers actually have, right? On the audiences, and
True.
how they can affect, like we just spoke about mental health there, all these kind of issues that can prop up for people. So it's a deep kind of
But actually, on that, they can also be very empowering on mental health, because actually they can. I've seen instances of individuals that have said, guys, I'm having a bit of a rough time at the moment, and the level of engagement on those stories is through the roof.
Yes,
through the roof. I'm not joking. I mean, I've had somebody that has had over 1 million views on LinkedIn. Because of a real tragic story that he was going through. And because I think, maybe it's a British thing. We don't want to see and hear from people that are constantly boasting. We want to feel that actually there's a chink in the armor of somebody, that we want to feel that because we know we've all got chinks in our armor. We want to know that we can, I know we look up to people that have maybe had success, but it hasn't been easy. It's the Rocky mentality, isn't it?
That's right.
I like to see people succeed, but I like to know that they've suffered a bit along the way.
I think you're right, because I think we all know inherently that there's two sides to the coin, isn't it? Like,
there is.
There's a success, but there's a failure side. But people try to hide the failure side. But what they don't realize is that sharing the failure could be the biggest win.
Absolutely right. 100% agree with you.
And that's I think there's not enough going on, because when you look at what's going on in the world, people are sharing it's things that make people compare themselves, thinking, I wish I was like that, right? As opposed to, hang on a minute, if you went down this route, you could do it, but it'd be it's better to know that this negative stuff exists as well.
Of course it is. Of course it is. If you look at the wellness industry, the fitness industry, and think how people have shared their experiences there, and I think COVID has opened up a Pandora's box for a lot of people. They may not have done this before, and particularly, dare I say it, 40 plus males have been horrendous at sharing their emotions and feelings. And this is, so when you get a male influencer who's able to be very open and expressive, I think, and you can tell that it's not fake, you can tell it's genuine, that can be really I mean, I tell you what, I will mention something that's moved me to tears countless times are the three dads walking. Mm-hmm. You remember the story about the three dads that raised thousands of pounds walking between each other's houses, and they suddenly lost their beautiful daughters, but they connected through each other. And in a funny sort of way, we're talking around about influence. They influenced a huge audience. People like Daniel Craig giving £10,000 and loads of others.
Yeah.
I think they were originally they were aiming for maybe 30,000 tops, and they were 750,000 a little while ago. And you see, those are the sorts of stories which resonate, which capture the mainstream media as well. That's the ultimate influence, when you can bring emotion into your story.
Yeah, I think it's that authentic message, like you were saying, because when people are able to come from that truthful place, right, that they're sharing their truth and they're being authentic about it and not masked in like fakeness, because there's a lot of fakeness out there. It's refreshing for people to actually say, actually, this is real. Quite. This is like, it's not made up. This is actually a human experience going on here.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I think you shared a lot of good insights there, right? And we were talking about influence, and it's like how much rapport relates to it as well, like building rapport with people. And you've mentioned so many things there about being authentic, resonance, values, and all these things are things that help people connect better. And do you want to just share a little bit about connection? And then, and then I'm just a bit cautious of the time for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would see myself as a natural connector of people. It's something I love doing, is bringing people together. But I do so because I know what one person wants over here and what another person wants over here, and it's about bringing those people together. But because I have brought those people together, I get the benefit of that credibility by association. And one of the most important things I talk about in my influencer program that I develop for thought leaders is this credibility by association. So you will link up with other audiences that are, or connectors of people that share the same target market as you, but you don't compete with them. Yeah. So for example, if you were a promotional products company, using my old industry I used to be involved with, it might not be a bad idea to link up with a printer and a design agency, because those two potentially have the ability to feed you with relevant opportunities, because they are almost in the same space, but you don't necessarily compete with them. Trying to find organizations and people that resonate with your own values as well, which is really, really important. I like to think of myself as authentic and genuine. I care about people. I want to work with people I trust, and feel comfortable with, because of course, when you're referring somebody to somebody else, if that relationship goes bad in any shape or form, that reflects badly on them, but it also reflects badly on you, to the person that you've referred to. So there is pressure on that relationship, but equally there is strength in it as well, because if I've referred somebody, it comes with the weight of my relationship with the first company in the first place. Well, if it's a friend of Gordon, then I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah. So it's almost like we do our own pre-vetting of people in that way. And that's also what influence is about. You are in a position of influence when you can build those relationships based around trust.
Absolutely, man. That's the key. There is trust, likability, authentic. This is the common message that keeps coming up when I have conversations around this thing. And I just think we need to share more of it to say, look, it is okay to be authentic. It is okay to be kind and considerate and,
Exactly.
watch out for other people. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, Gordon, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best thing for them to do?
Just go over to my website, which is gordonglenister.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. There's only one Gordon Glenister, I think, at the moment, I've found. So, and I've also, you can join my influencer marketing Facebook group with pleasure. We've got a massively growing audience in there and loads of great content. And then on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock every morning, I host a round table on influencer marketing. Very relaxed, friendly, good content, great people. It's only for an hour. Again, you can find that out from the influencer marketing Facebook group. But it's been a pleasure to be on the show, Jatinder, and thanks so much for giving me this time.
No, absolutely. I mean, thank you for taking the time out as well. And before we sign off, any last words you want to share with the audience?
Happy influencing.
Happy influencing. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gordon. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Any questions, leave comments, get in touch, and we'll do what we can to support you. So thank you very much.